We begin with breaking news. He was once one of the most notorious gangsters in Chicago. Tonight, President Trump is commuting the federal sentence of Gangster Disciples co-founder Larry Hoover.
Suzanne Lemonnier is in our newsroom. Suzanne, this move doesn't mean he'll be getting out of prison.
Erica, Joe, legal experts see this as a potential hollow victory. Now, while Hoover may be released from federal prison, he still has a 200-year state sentence for which a parole board has already denied early release. In 1993, Hoover spoke to former CBS News Chicago reporter John Davis, and at that time, Hoover was 42 years old and had already served 20 years in prison.
I've done my time. I paid my debt to society.
That was Larry Hoover, more than 3 decades ago. At that time, the leader of the Gangster Disciples and convicted murderer told our John Davis he had a lot of time to think about ways to stop the gang violence on the streets of Chicago.
One teenager don't like the other teenager because the way he wears his hat, because his ideology is different from his. A disciple don't like a vice lord. We all black people. It's no different.
At that time, Hoover, also known as King Larry, admitted being part of a fragile gang truce in the city and organizing a protest over plans to close healthcare clinics in African American neighborhoods. Ron Safer, the lead prosecutor in Hoover's federal trial, reacts to news Hoover's life sentence has been commuted by President Trump.
I was disappointed. I do not think that this is an appropriate end to the Larry Hoover story, at least the federal part of it.
Safer says Hoover was perhaps the most notorious criminal the state of Illinois has ever known.
He was convicted of running a continuing criminal enterprise that had approximately 30,000 members across 28 states, selling over $100 million worth of drugs in the state of Illinois alone each year. And he ran that entire operation with ruthless efficiency from prison, where he was serving a state sentence for double murder.
Safer also told us about Hoover being recorded, saying teenagers needed to sell drugs for his criminal organization. The recording was made a year after the Gangster Disciple leader was interviewed on CBS Chicago.
There was another tape where Larry Hoover said, "You have to share your drugs with these children." And I'm talking about 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old, so that they can sell it and they can have something. And he said, make them know that with you, they are somebody, and without you, they are nobody.
Meantime, shortly after the commutation announcement, Hoover's son posted this picture on Instagram. That's a White House official holding a copy of the commutation. Hoover's attorneys say they're thrilled he's going to be released from federal custody, but again, he still has a 200-year sentence to serve for his crimes in Illinois. In the newsroom, Suzanne Lemonnier, CBS News, Chicago.
Thank you, Suzanne.
What up, folks? It's Trails. We back. Welcome. And make sure you hit that like and you hit that subscribe. Now, we got some Donald Trump, Larry Hoover news to report on. And it's been reported that Wednesday, on the 28th of May, Donald Trump has commuted Larry Hoover's federal sentence. Now, he still has state sentencing to deal with, which begs me to question, why did Trump commute a sentence? And was it because he, believes that Larry Hoover has changed? I personally don't think so. I think this is a softening of the blow of him future trying to pardon Derek Chauvin. Now, what do I mean by that? All right, let's go with this article here coming out of Fox 13 from Salt Lake City. How did former gang leader Larry Hoover's case end up on President Trump's radar? Now, that's a good question. Now, I want you to put that in the back of your mind as we traverse through this situation. President Trump commuted Hoover's federal sentence, but he would need to petition the Illinois Prisoner Review Board to be granted clemency by Governor J.B. Pritzker to be freed from state prison. President Donald Trump on Wednesday commuted the federal sentence of Larry Hoover, a former Chicago gang leader who is serving a life sentence in a supermax prison in Colorado, most of which has been in solitary confinement, according to his lawyer. Hoover is not a free man, however. He still has state sentence to serve. But his attorney and supporters are pushing Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois to follow President Trump's lead, claiming the infamous former street gang kingpin is a changed man. The 74-year-old co-founded the Gangster Disciples in the 1960s by merging two street gangs with David Barksdale. He was convicted of murder in 1973 after he ordered a hit on a man named William Pookie Thug, whom he suspected of stealing from him, according to the Chicago Sun-Times. Young was shot in the head 6 times and his body was dumped in the alley. Hoover was sentenced to 150 to 200 years in state prison for his involvement, but the federal crimes came in the early 1990s. Hoover was reportedly still running the gang from behind bars, according to the Chicago Sun-Times. Prosecutors said the Gangster Disciples brought in about $100 million a year from drug sales under Hoover's leadership during the height of their rule. Investigators were able to monitor his conversation with gang leaders who visited him in prison by placing transmitters into the visitors' badges, since Hoover was careful not to talk about the business over the phone. A jury found him guilty of a list of crimes in 1997 related to his continued involvement with the gang. The judge gave Hoover another life sentence that he was moved to ADX Florence, a high-security prison reserved for the most high-profile or dangerous criminals in the U.S. The Chicago Sun-Times said Hoover denounced the Gangster Disciples in 2022 and has been petitioning for release under the First Step Act. It was a prison reform law that President Trump signed during his first term that is meant to address harsh sentencing and expand compassion release, among other things. Hoover's notoriety has kept him relevant in cultural references over the years, from a name-dropping rapper Rick Ross's song BMF, Blowing Money Fast, to a one-off benefit concert in 2021 called Free Larry Hoover Benefit Concert, put on by rappers Kanye West and Drake. How the idea of commuting Hoover's federal sentence ended up on President Trump's radar is not completely clear. West advocated for Hoover when he met President Trump during his first term in 2018. President Trump did not seem to know Hoover's name at the time. Earlier this year, President Trump appointed his former federal prisoner turned criminal justice reform advocate Alice Marie Johnson as his pardon czar, a first-of-its-kind position intended to advise him on clemency. Johnson's life sentence for a 1996 drug trafficking conviction was commuted by President Trump during his first term in 2018 after public advocacy for Kim Kardashian, who was still married to West at the time. Following the news of President Trump commuting Hoover's federal sentence, West posted on X Wednesday, "Words can't express my gratitude for our devoted, enduring President Donald Trump for freeing Larry Hoover. Hoover would need to petition the Illinois Prisoner Review Board or be granted clemency by Governor Pritzker to live the remainder of his life outside of prison." Yep. Now, shout out to Fox 13 for the article. So yeah, we never find out why or how this came to be. Could have been the pardon czar, Alice Marie Johnson or whatever her name. No, I don't believe it. It could be. It's a possibility. I personally don't believe it. I believe that if you go back to 2 weeks ago with the idea of floating around pardoning Derek Chauvin, you can see that maybe this is a softening of the blow here to be like, okay, well, I pardoned Larry Hoover, so, you can't be mad at me for doing it for Derek Chauvin too. And only time can tell who's right in this situation. But one thing I learned over the times is I'm never really wrong when it comes to these type of analyzations. So what say you in this situation? Did Donald Trump do this just randomly wake up and say, hey, I'm going to free Larry Hoover today because I believe he can, convince Pritzker, become free man and all of that? Or do you believe that this was just a softening of the blow done for some type of behind the scenes, yet to come nefarious reason? Let me know what you think in the comments, but make sure you definitely hit that like and you hit that subscribe. And we out, and you know what that means. Deuces.